Welcome back. Here's a number for you, $2.5 billion. That's the amount more than 15,000 groups and individuals have spent this year lobbying politicians. That's according to the Center for Responsive Politics. You might be surprised to learn how much is spent lobbying D.C. on religious interests. Kate Baldwin takes a look.
So I think at some point we do need to kind of go through question by question, and I don't
Sister Marge Clark has been a nun for more than 46 years. She's also a registered lobbyist working just blocks from Capitol Hill.
I think we're always looking through a faith lens. We're always looking at it from the cry of the poor.
Her firm, Network, considers itself a Catholic social justice advocate, lobbying on issues and legislation ranging from immigration to health care, fair pay, even the F-22 fighter jet program.
Why is it important to you to take your advocacy out of the church and onto Capitol Hill?
Because the church can't change the systems. It's law that has to be changed.
Sister Marge is far from unique. Political and religious experts say there has been a surge in religious lobbying in recent years, including Sikh, Buddhist, Hindu, Jewish, and Muslim groups.
If you belong to a church or a synagogue or a temple or a mosque, chances are your denomination or your faith has a Washington office. It has become that broad.
Alan Hertzky is the author of a soon-to-be-released Pew study on religious advocacy. He estimates the religious lobby is a multi-million-dollar enterprise with more than 200 official and unofficial groups vying for influence in Washington. While the scope of religious lobbying may be modest compared to the entire lobbying industry, those who study money and politics add it's very difficult to measure the muscle of faith. And skeptics say that is a problem, what they see as undue influence these groups wield, even as some maintain tax-exempt status.
I'm not saying that people don't have the right to make moral arguments to Congress, but Congress has to make its decisions not based on pressure from any church, but on the basis of the constitutional values of all of us.
So is the line separating church and state beginning to blur? Sister Marge says not at all.
Jesus was a political activist. He was trying to change unjust systems. And I think that's one of the ties for being a lobbyist.
Religious advocacy experts say rather than a legal issue, it's more a question of accepted standards. Where should faith-based organizations draw the line? A Pew study suggests the American public's view, at least, is shifting. In 1996, 54% said houses of worship should express their political views. In 2008, 52% said they should keep out of it. Christine?
All right, thank you, Kate. Let's put aside the politics. When it comes to your faith, it usually starts in the home. But for some, the religious beliefs we're raised with tend to fall to the wayside as we become adults. For author Mitch Albom, this was his story. Albom's new book, Have a Little Faith, is his own personal journey back to his faith, Judaism, and lessons he's learned about faith and hope. And this is really a story about money, too. When you talk about the rabbi, and then you talk about Henry Covington, this pastor in Detroit. These are two people with very small, limited means who are able to really change the people around them. And you found these amazing parallels between these two very different men from two very different religions. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, one was a suburban rabbi in his 80s and close to death, and the other was a Detroit inner-city pastor struggling to keep his church alive. And I was moving back and forth between these two worlds, from Detroit to New Jersey and back and forth. And yet I noticed that these two men who couldn't be more different on paper were still united by this very powerful force, faith. And that's what guided them through their particular problems. And I said, wow, if these two on the human line, so different, can be connected by this thing, then probably all of us somewhere along the way have our story. And that's what led me to the book.
Let's talk about faith and money then in American life in two very different ways in suburban New Jersey and then also in Detroit. Tell me a little bit about Detroit and Henry Covington and his amazing faith, even as the roof of his church building is falling down around him.
Yeah, literally. I got involved because I work with the homeless here in Detroit, and I heard about this shelter being operated in this church that had a giant hole in its roof and had had it for years, where rain and snow literally came in on the pews. And at one point, the congregation, made up of the very poor and in some cases homeless people, had to actually build a plastic tent inside their own sanctuary so that they would have a place that they could at least stay dry and semi-warm while the snow and rain fell around them on Sunday mornings. And I just thought this was tragic. And yet their faith was strong enough to do that. And what we ultimately did as a result of the book, I wrote the story, and ironically, we've had people from around the world respond to that very image, and they send in $1 and $5 and $7 to buy a shingle for the roof. And this week, we actually put a brand new roof on the church, and they're going to have their first dry Christmas thanks to the kindness of others. So you never know how faith can inspire money coming and going, you know.
Here in a recession, or we hope at the end of a recession, the beginning of a recovery, American families are pretty shaken. When you hear stories like this and you realize what people can give, do you think that people are going to give more? Do you think people are going to look away from consumer excess and trying to acquire things, and that maybe they're going to have a whole relationship with their faith like you now have?
You know, when the rabbi was close to the end, he told me a story about, he said, you know, when babies come into the world, do you ever notice how their little fists are clenched? And I said, yeah. He said, that's because babies think when they come into the world, not knowing any better, they can take it all. You know, they're going to have everything. He said, but look at me, I'm an old man, and how am I going to die? And he opened his hands like this. He said, that's because at the end you realize you can't take anything with you. And I think as we get older, we do realize that. And when we have a recession like we've had here, we do realize that. And what happened was, at least here in Detroit, you know, a lot of people put their faith in the workplace. They said, work's going to take care of me. I'll network. I'll be with my colleagues at night. You know, I don't need to be with my friends and family. Work is going to take care of me. And then all of a sudden, they get laid off. And what happens? Nobody in the workplace wants them anymore. It's as if they're contagious. Where did they go? At least around here, a lot of them went back to their church. So I do think that financial recession can actually lead to a return to faith, because I think we lost our way from a lot of that stuff when things were going good.
I think you might be right. Mitch Albom, the book is called Have a Little Faith. It's a terrific read, and Mitch is actually tithing 1/10 of the profits of that book will go to help fix that roof in Detroit. Best of luck to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Next, a glimpse into the future of faith and money in America.